Hello again, boils, ghouls, and non-binary creatures of the night. I hope you are ready, because I have a very special treat for you all today. I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite schlocky 90s German language horror comedies that satires hard-boiled noir detective films while using monstrous, yet somehow adorable, genital-devouring killer condom creatures designed by H.R. Geiger as a thinly veiled subtext to talk about the government's response to the AIDS epidemic, police ineptitude, and how conservative Christian obsession with moral purity can turn them into truly horrific villains. I mean, sure, movies of this sort are a dime a dozen, but how many of them have a coffee-guzzling, gay, grimy, gruff, grizzled Italian detective protagonist with a 32-centimeter dick who likes to hook up with hot young male prostitutes while being the only detective in the NYPD who is not only good at their job, but who gives a flying fuck about the lives of the poor sex workers and members of the queer community being victimized by the titular killer creatures? Seriously though, if nothing I have already mentioned piqued your interest, or at least raised your eyebrow a bit, I am not sure what will. This movie is a trip, and despite my dime a dozen joke, there really isn't anything else quite like this film or the comic book that inspired it. Before we venture too far down the rabbit hole though, there are a few things I want to address. First, the movie actually starts off with a very uncomfortable scene involving a lecherous professor taking one of their underage students to a sleazy New York motel, the Hotel Quickie, in order to try and coerce them into sexual activity with the lure of improving their failing grades. The scene will most likely make your skin crawl, but thankfully the perpetrator quickly becomes the victim of a sudden and unexpected penectomy before the scene reaches a full-on rape sequence. But I do still want to include a trigger warning here for those who aren't able to stomach this sort of content. After that sequence, the rest of the movie doesn't really have any more scenes like this. And the fact that the asshole gets his comeuppance right away is very satisfying, but I still think it requires a bit of a warning. Now, the other warning I want to give up front is that while this movie is very gay positive and based on a comic book written by kink-friendly gay comic book writer-artist, there is a major character in the film who I believe is meant to be trans. The film seems to go back and forth. Maybe a trans, maybe drag queen, but either way, the character is constantly dead-named throughout the film. For those unfamiliar with the term, dead-naming is when you call a transgender person by their birth name when they have changed their name as part of their transition. It is a big no-no, and when done intentionally, it's on par with intentionally misgendering someone. I will talk about this character at length in a little bit, but it is something I did want to kind of touch up on front and give a warning about, so you guys are prepared. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get the show on the road, shall we? So as I previously mentioned, the movie is based on a comic book. Well, actually, two comic books. Condom de Gron, the Killer Condom, or more accurately translated Condom of Horror, which originally came out in 1987, and its sequel, Bis auf die Knochen, Down to the Bone, which came out in 1990. Also, I apologize now to any German speakers for butchering those words. Anyways, the writer-artist of both, Ralph Konid, is a gay comic book creator from West Germany. He came out as gay in the late 70s and began to create short comic book stories focusing primarily on the daily routines of gay life. These comics were actually often based on the personal experiences of himself and his friends, and the stories were published in the Munich underground magazine Zomex. These comics quickly earned him a large fan base in the German gay community, and while his early works were just short, standalone vignettes, after returning to school from 81 through 86 to obtain an art major, he decided to try something new and created Killer Condom, his first comic book with a continuous story. His art style in both of the comic books the movie is based on is very cartoony, and even when dealing with serious themes, he tends to approach them with a sense of levity. The comic book also have a lot of nudity, and they make the movie seem extremely tame in comparison. I have a feeling this discrepancy may have something to do with German film censorship rules, based on a few comments in the director's commentary, but I really don't know enough about the German film industry to say for sure. So now that you know a little bit of the backstory, let's dive into the plot. The comic book and the film both start with the same scene I previously warned you about involving the rapey professor. From there, we jump to a New York police station where we are introduced to the hero of our story, a 40-something, chain-smoking NYPD detective of Italian descent named, and I am not making this up, Luigi Macaroni. This guy is meant to be a pastiche of every tired, gruff, hard-boiled detective cliché ever. They even include the obligatory turn-in-your-badge and gun scene required by any movie with a detective protagonist. The one major twist that separates our hero from other film detectives that came before and after is that he happens to be a very out and proud gay man who is actually decently good at his job and doesn't give a fuck what his colleagues, or anyone else for that matter, think about him. Luigi is assigned to investigate the inciting incident of the film, and assumes that despite her claims otherwise, the young girl obviously must have bitten off her teacher's penis. There's a very comedic scene where he bluntly states as much to the girl's parents, both of whom are from Farmville, Oklahoma, before offering them a cigarette and revealing that 4 other penises were taken in that same hotel that night. The other suspects being held for the cock-related crimes are all sex workers. And the fact that the police department has just automatically assumed that all of these women who were with the men when their penises were bitten off are the culprits is meant to demonstrate how lazy and inept the NYPD of this era was. Seriously, if it was just one person it would make sense, but the NYPD just goes off of the assumption that there is some sort of mass castration madness afflicting the patrons of the Hotel Quickie. Despite his initial insistence that it's a clear-cut case of cockmunchery, our hero Macaroni decides to go to the motel himself to check out the scene of the crime. On the taxi cab ride over to the hotel, we're treated to an old noir-style monologue where Luigi talks about the grimy city of New York and the awful crimes that occur within it, while he also pines for his old home in Sicily. Even though he knows that his mother would be heartbroken if he were ever to return home without a virginal bride in tow. Now, I do want to point something out here that is just really awesome. Once he finishes his little monologue, we see him walk across the busy New York streets on his way to the hotel. So this scene was actually filmed in New York, as were a few other outdoor scenes, with all the interior shots filmed on sets back in Germany. Fun fact about these New York shots, though, the filmmakers didn't actually have permission or permits to film and would either bribe someone or just start filming, and anytime someone tried to stop them, they just pretended to be a German documentary crew who didn't speak English very well. And people just kind of let them keep filming, which is great in my opinion. But as a result of this guerrilla filmmaking tactic, for this scene where he is walking across multiple lanes of traffic, he really was just exiting out of a cab in the middle of traffic and then blindly walking across the street. Apparently the actor was actually terrified he was going to be hit by a bus or something, and I do not blame him. Between Final Destination and Mean Girls, I am always terrified a bus is going to come out of nowhere and just mow me down. Anyways, once Luigi arrives at the Hotel Quickie, we are introduced to the character of Babette. I kind of touched on her briefly earlier, and at first I believe she was meant to be a drag queen, but based on other elements in the film, I do believe she is more likely meant to be trans. We're first introduced to her as a performer at the hotel bar, where she's up on stage, badly lip-syncing to the Fuji song Killing Me Softly. I found out from the director's commentary that she was originally actually singing a completely different song in the German release, but they couldn't get the rights to the song she sang for the international release. So instead, they decided to just dub over a completely different song. And the result is she went from looking like a great singer and competent entertainer to looking like she is the world's worst lip syncer of all time. Anyways, while Babette is badly failing to lip sync for her life, Macaroni is in the lobby talking to the sketchy old man at the front desk about what happened and obtaining a key to the hotel room where it all went down. It's here where he locks eyes with a young Twinkie rent boy more interested in trade negotiations than a Star Wars prequel, if you get my drift. One look at this kid, and our pal Luigi Macaroni knows this boy is down for some real rough trade, and seeing his excitement, the hotel clerk reveals that the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, trick-turning boy that Luigi is suddenly smitten with is named Bill, and apparently he is quite a good earner. The two of them eye-fuck each other some more, before Detective Macaroni decides he wants to fuck this boy with more than just his retinas. And since he now has the keys to the crime scene, he decides to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and asks his new puppy-faced prostitute paramour to follow him upstairs for some Sicilian sausage. Unfortunately, before the 2 lovebirds can make their way upstairs, Babette, having just completed her song, calls out to Luigi from across the room, shouting, "Luigi!" and then rushing over to corner the detective in front of the elevator. Macaroni asks her what she's doing here, and when he does so, he refers to her as Bob, but she quickly corrects him and lets him know it's Babette now, and that she got a job as the hotel lounge singer because there's a rumor that a famous producer likes to spend time and money at the hotel, and she hopes to catch his eye so he can whisk her away to Hollywood and make her a star. Luigi wishes her good luck and starts to walk away, prompting her to call him Loogie again. He quickly corrects her, stating his name is Luigi, and that Loogie doesn't exist anymore. Babette persists, indicating she will always call him Loogie, and it's revealed that they used to be in a relationship together, and it's the groundbreaking sex they used to have that helped her figure herself out. She also says her therapist thinks Luigi needs her and just fears commitment, and is too proud to show her or anyone else his real feelings. Babette also states that her therapist believes she reminds Luigi of his mother, and that is part of why he keeps pushing her away, since his feelings toward his mother are exceedingly complicated. Virginal bride and all that jazz. The whole thing is a lot to digest. Babette is honestly an interesting character. I went back and forth at first on if she was meant to be a drag queen or if she really is trans, and kind of ended up deciding on the latter. The movie isn't great at clearing this up, though. I also worried the movie was going to get real transphobic real quick, but the thing is, while she is meant to serve as a comedy relief character, the comedy doesn't come from her being trans, but instead from her being the crazy love-struck ex-girlfriend. If you were to change out this character with a cis male or a cis female, outside of the dead naming, none of the other jokes or story would really change in any way. Even the repeated dead naming is a bit more complicated than it first appears. While Luigi keeps referring to her as Bob when they are together, when they are apart he calls her Babette, and when anyone else uses her old name, he quickly corrects them. So there's this weird dissonance between his actions where you almost feel like he is doing it on purpose just to try and drive her away. And also, although not fully comparable, Babette herself refuses to stop using her old pet name for Luigi, even though he repeatedly asks her to. The relationship is complex, to say the least, but she ends up having a pretty good arc in the story, finally getting past her obsession with him towards the end of the film. And Luigi at several points shows that while he has zero interest in being with her romantically, he still considers her a friend and cares about her. For a 90s movie, it feels weirdly progressive, and compared to most trans film characters at this time, she's a fairly positive inclusion in the story. And so it sits in this sort of weird middle ground for me where I don't always know how to feel about it. There are also aspects of her character and her past with Luigi that are left a bit vague, leaving a lot of elements up to interpretation. So yeah, Babette is an interesting and complex character that's hard to really dissect even in a video as long as this one. I will say that while she comes off a little grating at first, she quickly grew on me, and I can't imagine the movie without her, which is sort of interesting since she's not actually a character in the comic book. Her story was basically invented for the movie. Anyways, back to the film. Finally making it to the scene of the crime, aka their new hookup spot, Bill and Luigi start to strip. And I just have to say, in my humble opinion, both of these two are really fucking hot. And they clearly think the same about each other as well. Although Bill is a little hesitant at first to sleep with a cop, Luigi tells him that if it really bothers him to just pretend he's an insurance salesman. And Bill admits as much as he hates the idea of sleeping with a pig, there is a part of them that's also a little turned on by it as well. And it's at this point in our story where we learn that Luigi is very well endowed. In fact, according to him, he's exactly 32 centimeters long, or in American, 12.59 inches. And everything about this shot of Bill reacting to Luigi's endowment is fantastic. Anyways, while Bill and Detective Macaroni prepare to canoodle their cannolis, unbeknownst to them, a killer condom is casually creepy crawling across the nightstand, heading towards them in hopes of interrupting their fun. Macaroni goes to grab it off the table, only to have Bill insist they use the condom he brought himself, since he doesn't trust the ones the hotel provides, especially since they aren't individually wrapped. Also, good on Bill for being smart when it comes to his safe sex practices. The condom, though, is not dissuaded by this momentary setback, and still tries its best to make a meal of Macaroni's mammoth meat, only to wind up busting his balls instead. Well, one ball. See, the condom misses when it lunges at the detective, and instead of taking 32 centimeters off the tip, it manages to scarf down Luigi's right testicle before scurrying away from the scene of the crime. That means now this case isn't just a job. This time, it's personal. We cut from the hotel to the hospital where Luigi is recovering while stuck in bed. Luigi's painfully straight police partner pays him a visit and reveals the official story the NYPD is going with is that Bill is some sort of crazed callboy who bit off Luigi's bits then ran off. They even have a warrant out for the poor guy. Luigi explains the reason Bill ran was just because he was scared, and the real truth is there is a killer condom out there on the loose and it needs to be hunted down and brought to justice. For some strange reason, his partner isn't convinced by Luigi's rants and laughs off his clearly absurd explanation. Also, fun side note, watch the back of the room for this random ghost nurse who floats by creepily. The director mentioned it in the commentary, and apparently it's just in there as a random bit of fun nonsense. I kind of love it. Of course, While his partner is laughing off Macaroni's concerns, we the audience know that great detective Luigi Macaroni is correct, and there is in fact a killer condom on the loose. And while Luigi is laid up in the hospital, the carnivorous condom's cock-munching cavalcade of carnage continues, and we are soon treated to a montage of all the condom attacks that occur while our hero is recuperating. In total, the condom manages to make a meal of 13 more male members before Macaroni is finally discharged from the hospital. Now, back on the case, Macaroni tries to investigate, despite the NYPD's best efforts to prevent him from doing so. While staking out the hotel and waiting for the condom to strike, he accidentally interrupts a kinky play scene with Babette and another man, and as he apologizes to the two of them, he hears a scream from down the hall and takes chase after the miscreant rubber creature. He almost manages to corner the thing, chasing it down a hallway and firing multiple rounds at it, but it outfoxes him and manages to escape. At this point, Macaroni is at the end of his rope, and that is when Babette shows up at his house hoping for a hookup. After a short parody of the Psycho shower scene where she surprises Luigi in the shower, it's revealed in preparation for her planned reunion/rendezvous, she brought some condoms from the hotel, unknowingly smuggling Luigi's personal Moby Dick into his apartment via her purse. Which of course leads to a great sequence where Babette and Luigi work together to take out the creature by pretending a gas pipe is Luigi's dick and blowing the killer condom to pieces. Afterwards, the coroner gives us a lesson on killer condom anatomy and basically reveals the condom was bioengineered somehow. So yeah, the killer condoms are bioorganic weapons. Yep, BOWs. Clearly Umbrella Corp has gone too far this time. Luigi doesn't really care though, and now that he thinks the carnage is over, he starts to focus on fixing his friendship with Babette and potentially developing a serious relationship with the young Bill, though he fears he's too old and jaded for the boy, and also worries what his mother would think if she ever found out about his new love interest. The two have great chemistry though, and despite being very PG-13 in nature, there's a mind-blowingly and fuse-blowingly great sex scene set in the Hotel Quickies elevator. While Luigi is busy proving that losing one of his nuts hasn't exactly slowed him down, a whole wave of killer condoms sweep the city, even taking off someone's nose, mistaking it for something else. The police still aren't all that concerned though, since its victims are all still primarily sex workers and homosexuals and the stray tourist, none of which the NYPD gives a flying fuck about. Enter Dick McGovern, a conservative politician who talks about cleaning up the city in order to make it great again and bring back God and good Christian morals. Again, I am not making this up. After a hard day of campaigning, this slimy Republican douchebag is relaxing with his mistress and his rubber ducky when one of the rude rubbers interrupts his bath time fun and manages to turn him into Dickless McGovern. The whole thing winds up on the evening news, and now that someone outside the minority communities previously affected has been attacked, the police chief is suddenly forced to give a fuck. There are some very great and very intentional parallels drawn to the AIDS epidemic and how those in power were slow to respond when it primarily affected groups they had zero love for. And I kind of love how there's all this pretty meaningful symbolism in a completely bonkers, trashy horror comedy like this. Anyways, now that Dick is dickless, the investigation is finally being taken seriously. And because one of the major hotbeds of cop gloss is the local gay bars and hookup spots, Luigi is ordered to hit up the local leather bars to try and dig up more information on the source of these creatures. However, he manages to convince the chief that he is way too well known at the bars, and because everyone already knows he's a cop, they just won't cooperate. He instead insists they send in his straight partner, who Luigi delights in dressing up in kink gear, and in one of the best jokes of the movie, and one borrowed from the movie Cruising, Luigi convinces his partner to keep a yellow hanky in his back right pocket, telling him it's code for "I'm not interested in sex tonight. Please leave me alone." For anyone unfamiliar with the hanky code, what a yellow hanky actually means is that you're into water sports. And when it's in the right back pocket, it means you want to be the one receiving the golden showers, not giving them. This prank by Luigi results in the other detective being pissed on while on a stakeout at the Eagle. In the comic book, they actually show the encounter, and the big leather daddy actually pisses in the detective's mouth. In the movie, the altercation takes place off-screen, and the piss top apparently only peed on the detective's leg. Either way, the result is the same. His partner is pissed off about being pissed on, pun intended, and wants off the case. Luigi apologizes to his partner for the prank and explains that while he finds it funny, he never thought anyone would actually piss on the poor putz. His partner still wants off the case, though, but Luigi tells them that whatever he thinks about their lifestyles, all of the victims are people who are just out being themselves and looking for a good time. Realizing that Luigi is right and it doesn't matter if the victims are queer or straight, sex workers or tourists, etc., their job is to serve and protect. The two of them redouble their efforts, and thanks to the help of one of the victims, who doesn't speak English or German, whatever, they manage to track down the evil masterminds who created the creatures plaguing the city. The film culminates in a secret lab under a church-run hospital where the evil mastermind behind the Killer Condom epidemic is revealed to be a religious doctor hell-bent on wiping out all of the homosexuals and prostitutes and people having sex out of wedlock in order to clean up the city before the Lord Jesus' imminent return. To enact her plan, she kidnapped a renowned Russian scientist, Dr. Smirnov, and to ensure he does her bidding, she has gotten him addicted to either cherry jello or some sort of drug that is red and jello-like in nature. I really have no idea, but apparently he really needs a red jelly fix. This female Fox News anchor wannabe is also quite the evil mastermind, and knowing Macaroni was on her trail, had her imprisoned scientist create a giant Uber condom to go head-to-head with Luigi's mammoth member. She also managed to capture Bill, Babette, and Luigi's police partner to hold as hostages. So now the only three people in the world Luigi cares about, besides his mother, are dangling over a pit filled with piranha-esque, penis-pilfering, prophylactic predators, and with his own pecker also on the line, Luigi is running out of options. And his solution is, of course, to give the speech to end all speeches. He points out the villain's own hypocrisy and asks her to take a look at the blasphemous whore she has created in the Lord's name. He talks about how these people deserve the right to live, and only God himself has the right to cast judgment on them, not her, and that he earnestly believes when God does pass judgment, he will protect all lovers, and that whether gay or straight, we are all human beings. This sermon is cheesy as fuck, but at the same time it's weirdly great. By being so preachy and over the top, it manages to spell out the themes of the film while also not taking itself too seriously. Luigi, while he means every word of what he is saying, is also stalling for time in hopes of backup arriving. When it finally does arrive, our religious villainess, rather than face justice, flings herself into the pool of carnivorous condoms. Finally, the day is saved, and Luigi, now fed up with the NYPD, quits, despite the police chief admitting he is their best detective. He even tries to just tell him to take time off, but Luigi isn't convinced, though, and instead offers to take Bill out for some Italian food at the best place in the world to get Italian food, Italy. Yep, Macaroni wants to take his new boyfriend to Sicily to meet his mother. Bill asks if she'll like that, and Luigi says no, but they don't have to tell her he isn't a virgin. Luigi also confesses the only thing that makes him sad about quitting the force is he will miss hearing Bill call him cop, since it turns him on a little. Bill says he will always call him a cop, and the two lovebirds walk off into the sunset to live happily ever after. So yeah, I am not making any of that up. This is a movie about a gay cop with a 32-centimeter penis, a rent boy love interest, and a trans ex-girlfriend who has to stop an evil religious nutbag who is creating killer condoms to take out the people she deems perverts before the end of days comes and Jesus returns to walk the earth. Seriously, this movie is bonkers and also gay as fuck, and it's actually well made. Like, surprisingly well made. The majority of the humor really lands, and the movie actually had me laughing my ass off every time I watched it. But it also has a weirdly poignant message and plays around with some more serious subjects and themes. Plus, just having this weirdly charming gay love story in the middle of this B-monster movie is kind of epic. The movie isn't without a few issues, and it isn't exactly perfect, but damn if it isn't fun. Currently, the movie isn't on any of the major streaming services, not even Troma's, and they are the ones who originally distributed the movie in the United States. I'd say buy a copy, but a US region DVD will cost you anywhere from $75 to $300, though if you happen to have a region-free DVD player, you can get a non-US copy of the movie for like $20 on Amazon. The only place I could find to easily watch this movie currently is on YouTube. Someone posted a DVD rip of the movie so you can watch the whole thing, though the video quality isn't the best. I assure you, though, it's worth struggling through the sometimes grainy subtitles to experience this cinematic treasure. Also, speaking of the subtitles, one of my favorite tidbits I learned from the director's commentary on this movie was that, one, they originally thought about doing the movie in English since it was set in New York, but decided after all of the American movies they had watched set in Germany, where everyone speaks English but with bad German accents, that it would be way more fun to do the movie in German and have everyone parody American accents. Also, the director said this weirdly, out of all of the movies that have been released overseas. He thinks that this one has some of the best and most accurate subtitles he has seen. Not that this says a whole lot. One final side note, the marketing for this film really tries to push that H.R. Geiger, the German surrealist who helped design the xenomorph and alien and Sill and Species, is responsible for the Killer Condom. In fact, he was a creative consultant who helped a tiny bit with how the insides of the condom should look, including the close-ups of its little mouth, and a little on the giant Uber condom design at the end of the movie. But he wasn't as involved with the production as the advertising wants you to think. He was more of a glorified consultant. That said, you can still feel a bit of his influence in the slimy innards of our rubbery beasts. Well, I think that's enough of my blabbering for now. If you somehow sat through this entire video, and even more unlikely enjoyed yourself while doing so, feel free to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Speaking of, I have a few fun and much shorter standalone videos planned, including a fun arts and crafts project. But my next full-length video will actually be on the entire history of Chucky, from the original Child's Play movie, all the way through Cult of Chucky, to the awful remake, and finally the new TV series, and of course the gay man behind it all, Chucky creator Don Mancini. Because it will be a lot to cover, it'll most likely be divided up over 3 videos, so yeah, something fun to look forward to. Anyways, ta-ta for now, and remember kids, shampoo for your real friends, real poo for your sham friends, unless either are into scat, then it's the inverse.